Hey, what's up, sports fans? Welcome to the Go Run a Route podcast. My name is Keaton Henry. Last night we saw four fantastic teams, the best of the best, collide, and we officially have a Super Bowl matchup in place. This weekend's NFC title game was bonkers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers dropped the Green Bay Packers 31 to 26, led by Tom Brady's three touchdowns and Leonard Fournette's 55 yards and a lone score on the offensive side of the ball. The Packers had made a late push to take the game, but poor play calling and a surprisingly ineffective Aaron Rodgers fell flat in the end. So in the end, Brady returns to the Super Bowl with his new team, and Tampa Bay will be the first team to ever play a Super Bowl in their home field stadium. My MVP for the game is obviously Tom Brady, with a side dish of uh, great first half defense. Brady is the GOAT, and there's not much to say about that. To do what he is doing at the crisp age of 43 is just it's unparalleled. Even the great Joe Montana couldn't do what Brady has done. My MVD, which stands for Most Valuable Dud, has to land with Aaron Rodgers in the end. Don't get me wrong, he played a fantastic game, but when the lights shone brightest, he fell short again. The knock on Rodgers has always been an inability to overcome his team's weaknesses, and to me, that will have to continue to haunt him until he can get his team to the big dance again. It just seems like he continues year after year to fall flat and flat and flat in those NFC title games. Uh, so, should he continue to be with Green Bay, and I'll get more on that later, um, he's got to figure it out. There's just something that continues in the crunch. Coaches change, players change around him, but it continues to be just the story at the end of the day that Aaron Rodgers himself does not seem to have the ability to be able to take his team on his shoulders at that one moment in time at the end of a game and make the difference. Now, on the AFC side of things, the Chiefs handle the Buffalo Bills 38-24 at Arrowhead. 325 yards and three touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes. It definitely stands out on the stat sheet. But I actually believe the true MVP here is the defense and the defensive coaching staff. In the end, the Bills rode uh, into Kansas City as hot as really any NFL team this season, and Steve Spagnuolo's crew virtually stifled Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and shut that connection down, a connection that had been dominating opposing defenses for most of the season and postseason to that point. Um, as I mentioned before, my MVP for this game is the Chiefs defense, whereas the MVD is actually the Chiefs wide receiver and return man, Mecole Hardman. He fumbled a punt return early in the game, which almost immediately led to a score for the Bills. Now, Harmon certainly redeemed himself with several big plays in space on the offensive side of the ball and accrued 50 rushing yards and a receiving touchdown in the end. But big games call for big responsibility, and the Chiefs can't afford to make those mistakes in the Super Bowl. At the end of the day, uh, Hardman is a punt returner. I was for sure that the Chiefs were going to pull him out of that position going into the playoffs, and I think this shows why. Too many mistakes, too many costly turnovers, and like I mentioned, you can't do that in big games. You can't do that in the Super Bowl. So at the end of the day, I hope for the Chiefs' sake, the next week, or I should say next 2 weeks, when the Super Bowl comes around, that a change has been made there. But in the end, having the weekend be complete now, my predictions landed a perfect 2-0. So if you listen to last week's episode, you heard me give lots of reasons. Most significantly, the quarterback matchups. Again, Aaron Rodgers has not proven that he can get past the NFC title game. And until he does, that's kind of where he sits for me. Tom Brady, on the other hand, again, he's not necessarily proven in the NFC to this point, but uh, he's got a mountaintop of reasons why he is uh, or should be considered to be successful every year in the playoffs. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes. My reasoning last week again was Patrick Mahomes has been there, done that. So when it gets down to crunch time, I think you saw against the Chiefs, the Josh Allen, sort of fell apart when Stephon Diggs was not on the receiving end of a ball. The inaccuracy and the questionable decision making really began to come out again. And I think you saw that his first couple years in the season. I think you saw it return against the Chiefs. Now we'll kind of get to the headlines for the week. There was a lot of big headlines that hit the wire, and I'd certainly like to hit as many as I can. According to some reports, Deshaun Watson continues to want out of Houston and has made it clear that any head coaching hire will not change his stance on that. In my opinion, it's time for the NFL, its teams, and its big-pocketed owners to understand that there is a shift happening. Whether they like it or not, the NFL is becoming more and more like the NFL, or the NBA rather, with regards to contract obligations, trades, etc. The reality is, a couple years ago, the best running back at the time, Le'Veon Bell, sat out an entire season because he was unhappy. Now, we can certainly debate who won in regards to that holdout, but the point remains that the Steelers had no control in forcing him to stay or return to the field. The ball was strictly in Bell's court. Similar situation in Jacksonville, Jalen Ramsey. Ramsey controlled the narrative. And once the Jags realized that he wasn't playing another game for them, they made a move. So in that particular case, I believe that it worked out in Ramsey's favor there. But the point is, in the end, that the Texans have to understand that this situation doesn't resolve in a clean-cut fashion unless they inevitably move on from Deshaun Watson. In the end, a new head coach deserves to know what the situation looks like before he accepts the job. And in my opinion, it sounds like it was down to Eric Bieniemy, the Chiefs offensive coordinator, and Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator for the Bills. Either way, if I were them, I'm turning that job down. I think both of their situations are fantastic. I think Eric Bieniemy has the perfect job for a guy who's not yet a head coach. Absolutely perfect. And I think if he ends up in Houston and has to deal with that mess and possibly not even get to keep Deshaun Watson, then what's left? What do you have left on that roster that is enticing at all? J.J. Watt? No. So if I'm Eric Bieniemy, I honestly think Eric Bieniemy is probably the better choice. I think it's not a slight on Leslie Frazier. I just think that Eric Bieniemy is the guy, or should be the guy. He should have been the guy the whole since the beginning. And if he had been the guy since the beginning for the Texans, I don't think you're having these issues with Deshaun Watson now. But in addition to the report that Watson is set on a trade, it sounds like his preferred landing spot is actually the New York Jets, followed by the Miami Dolphins. I know on last week's episode I spoke about how the Miami-Watson connection makes a ton of sense for both sides. I still believe that. I honestly, other than the popularity side, I don't know if he's a fan of the Jets' new head coach or what, but I'm honestly not as much of a fan for the New York connection. But honestly, any team that's willing to build around a star like Deshaun Watson is a great situation, and certainly surpasses his current situation in Houston. So another report coming out from Adam Schefter, Detroit Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford has reached an agreement with the Lions to mutually part ways, which basically means that a trade is likely to be the next move for the both sides there. The question becomes there is what team could be in the market for a still very talented 32-year-old quarterback. The truth is that there will likely be north of 5 teams, in my opinion, that could use a guy like Stafford. I'm sure there are teams that certainly in the back of their mind might prefer Stafford, but it might not be as realistic of a situation. But for me, the Chicago Bears, with the instability of Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles, makes a ton of sense. The Bears roster is very stout. The defense is great. Special teams is pretty good. And honestly, the offense, I mean, they're coming on. They got a great offensive coach. I'm a huge fan of Matt Nagy. But honestly, Stafford could be the missing piece for that team. Could jet the Bears back into the playoffs next year. From there, I think you've got to look at the Patriots, Saints, 49ers, Washington, and the Texans, ultimately, if they move Deshaun Watson. And then the last team I've got is the Jets. But there again, kind of depends on what they do with the Watson deal. If he's in New York, then the Texans kind of fill in as a possibility, in my opinion. Really, it comes down to the price differences for a guy like Watson compared to a guy like Stafford, and how ready the team's roster is to compete. With Watson, you're obviously getting several more years to offer a team in need, and certainly a higher ceiling at this point. So at the end of the day, obviously, I'm sure that most teams would rather invest in a guy like Deshaun Watson, but the cost is absolutely going to be way more. You're talking about half a decade difference in age, and that's a lot of potential and a lot of ceiling to eventually reach. So you buy yourself a little bit more time with Deshaun Watson if you're wanting to go that route. Honestly, if I were looking at it, I think in the end, the most likely is that Watson ends up in New York, and then you end up with Matthew Stafford probably with the Patriots. I think they've hopefully had enough of the debacle that has been Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham in New York. So I think at the end of the day, a guy like Stafford is really what you need there, and hopefully with quite a bit of cap space and some flexibility to move around, they can get some pieces around him. So yesterday featured a ton of ups and downs for four fan bases. Next, I want to get a sense of where the Buccaneers fans sit with regard to their key victory over the Packers, and Tom Brady returning to his 10th Super Bowl. It's crazy. Border Field columnist Ken Filler joins us coming up to discuss the Brady-Rodgers duel, as well as the outlook for Tampa Bay as they begin prep for the Super Bowl. And then actually later in the episode, we've got Byron Smith, which is the Director of Operations for Border Fuel. He'll join the show to talk about the Chiefs' win over the Bills and their outlook as they continue their Run It Back tour. Hey, sports fans. Before we start the show, I wanted to tell you why I chose to host the Go Run a Route podcast on Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Now all you got to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the show. Hey, Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Keaton. Good to be with you. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. First and foremost, as someone who covers the Bucs, what is the mindset for Tampa Bay fans following such a tough contest against Rodgers and the Packers?
They're just elated. The whole town is just literally on fire. Toward the end of the game, Dale Mabry and Himes Avenue, which is right by Raymond James Stadium there was hundreds of fans in the stadium lots. They were blocking the road, blowing horns. The Bucs actually put out a little piece on social media. Due to COVID, please do not come to the airport. Please do not come to the stadium. And it was comical to see the responses. Sorry, we're already there. And
right,
I just
too late.
I just saw a video, and the airport is just packed. So the town is just going crazy. And with the Super Bowl being in Tampa, it's going to be just an awesome awesome feeling. I mean, the Rays were in the World Series, the Lightning have won the Stanley Cup, now the Bucks are in the Super Bowl. That all happened within a span of 5 months. So it's been a really great run for the Bucks, and Tampa's a football town first and foremost, and the fans are just eating it up. Been 18 years, since the Super Bowl, the '02 season. So everybody's excited. We're ready for it, and wish the game was tomorrow.
Absolutely. It kind of sounds like the environment in Kansas City. You had Sporting KC win a couple titles, and then you had the Royals in 15, and then you had the Chiefs obviously last year, all kind of compiled into one, which it kind of brought us all back from a rough several decades of sports across the board, as far as trying to win or at least be competitive. So definitely think they can relate there. So as far as the game goes, a lot has been made about the ending of the game. Disagreements over pass interference calls, decision to kick a field goal, etc. So much of that, so much of that has compiled now that Rodgers is reportedly uncertain about his future in Green Bay and everything. What's your take on all that? And is in your opinion, is the whole Rodgers thing kind of overblown just as part of the disagreements he has had with his head coach now, or is that real, and is that going to be something that festers into the offseason?
I think it's really too soon to make a call on that. And the reason I say that, after an emotional game, an emotional loss, people always, say things that they sometimes regret, or they'll a week, 2 weeks later, after things have had a chance to calm down and settle down, they'll think about it and, yeah, I kind of misspoke. I was a little frustrated at the time. And I don't think he's going to retire. He's only 37 years old. He's still playing at a very, very high level. He had his best season, in my opinion, of his career. I mean, why would you want to walk away now? I mean, the Packers are loaded, and they're going to be players for the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl for a few more years yet. That window is still open. And, Rodgers still has a chance to add to his legacy and bring some more championships to Green Bay. So I think it was just frustration on his part. I did see the post-game interview where he was asked about the decision to kick the field goal, and there was a real long pause there. And basically he just said, that was not my decision. And if you read between the lines, you kind of gathered that he was not in favor of kicking that field goal. I heard, the coach's comments, and although I agree with them, you got a Hall of Fame quarterback that still has pretty good wheels. You're 8 yards away. You're in a situation where you really need a touchdown. Why not take a chance? It's fourth down. Worst case scenario, the Bucks have 98 yards to go to try to run out the clock. I mean, that decision to me was kind of head scratching. Here in Tampa, the Kevin Cash's decision to pull Blake Snell with giving up just 2 hits in the 6th inning in a World Series game was one of the head scratching decisions of all time. Well, to kick this field goal in that situation just kind of, put that Blake Snell decision down a little bit. I mean, this decision will be talked about for a long, long time to come. I mean, it really will. I mean, look at the difference, and I'll give you the end of the first half. Bruce Arians brought out his punt team on 4th and 4 and said, hold up, boys, we're going to call timeout here, and we're going to think about it. He sends Brady out. Kevin King gets beat by Scotty Miller, and they score a touchdown with like 1 second to go. And that was a huge play in that game, a huge momentum swing. So, I think Rodgers is coming back, and on the field goal decision, I think that was a poor call. And I think as we get into the offseason, coach has a chance to think about it. I think he'll probably, admit that we should have gone for it. The field goal just wasn't going to help us much in that situation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so obviously Tom Brady's his first year in Tampa. He came to Tampa this offseason, and really shocked most of everybody in doing so, right? Um,
Hmm.
uh, but even then, for most, the expectation was simply to compete. It was to get Tampa just a couple more steps forward than they had with Jameis at quarterback, and ideally, uh, just be towards the top of that division in the end, right? Everybody thought the Saints were still going to be king over the division more than likely. Um, but again, the goal was just mostly to compete, not necessarily that they'd make the Super Bowl in year one. So, how surprised are you that this is where we are so early in the Brady Arians era?
I think we're all surprised. But the one thing we've learned about Tom Brady, he plays to win. Okay, second place is the first loser. Tom's not satisfied being in second. He plays every game, every down, every play to win. The Bucs were 7-5 when they went into the bye week. That was right after a loss to your Kansas City Chiefs here in Tampa,
Mm-hmm.
27-24. They did some soul searching that week, and they have not lost since that bye week. They have won 7 in a row. They finished the regular season winning 4, and now they've won 3 on the road in the playoffs. And the Bucs have been a good road team all season long. They've been 8-2 total now, 9-2, I think, with the playoff wins. But it is somewhat surprising considering where they were at 7-5, and everybody had kind of written them off. And even in December, as they were racking up these wins, everybody was kind of second guessing them. Oh, it's just the Detroit Lions. Yeah, you won 47-7. Well, heck, Aaron Rodgers beats up on them boys twice a year, and nobody says anything.
Absolutely.
And then well, that's just the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, the Falcons are in last place. Yeah, that's nothing. 3 of their last games were 2 against Atlanta, 1 against Detroit. So they went into the playoffs. I don't think they had a lot of questions amongst themselves whether they were going to be successful. It was just, the national media, the sports fans around the country saying, "Oh, yeah, but they haven't played anybody. Yeah, they beat the Lions, but yeah, they're not going to do much in the playoffs." People were really surprised when they beat Washington. A lot of
Yeah.
people had Washington beating them, and then, well, you're going to lose to the Saints. The Saints have beat you twice, and they really blew you out at home,
Yeah.
38-3 on a Sunday night. You're playing in New Orleans. There's no way you're going to win in Drew Brees' house. Well, guess what? They did, 30-20. And the same thing with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. All we heard all week was how great Aaron Rodgers was, and how he was just going to light that defense up. Defense wasn't that good, and you saw what happened. The Bucs defense is pretty good. They bend a lot, but in critical situations, as in the fourth quarter today, they were there when Tom Brady was having one of the worst halves he has played this season. I mean, that was an awful half of football for Tom Brady, even if I do have to say so myself.
Right.
But everybody's kind of surprised, and I think if you would talk to people and they say, "Oh yeah, we thought the Bucs would go to the Super Bowl," you really wouldn't. I mean, after that 38-3 loss, after losing 2 in a row to the Rams and the Chiefs, 27-24, there's nobody that would have said, "Oh yeah, this team's got Super Bowl potential." I mean, on paper, yes, but on the field, when they actually played the games, no. So it's somewhat, to me, a surprise that they're here, but it's pleasant surprise.
Right. Well, and I mean, you went through the whole off season with COVID and everything, and you weren't able to get on the field, and you weren't able to build, that repertoire with everybody. Which, when you're talking about, even if you're talking about Tom Brady, it doesn't matter what kind of weapons they are if you aren't able to get enough field time to actually see how they work and how they fit and ball placement and everything. And that certainly that does take time. So yeah, I agree with you. The 7-5 marker, I think a lot of people, including myself, at times may have doubted the potential ceiling at least this year.
Yes.
But, in my opinion, having seen them come and finally get into the playoffs, once they were in the playoffs, to me, it was like, okay, this is where if the rest of this team has meshed with Tom Brady the way that he needs them to, it doesn't matter who you're playing. It doesn't matter what's happened before, because this is a whole different team now. This is a whole different situation. It's kind of funny because everybody in the AFC was praising the Bills for what they've accomplished this year.
Yes.
Whereas they were saying in Tampa's situation, well, they who have they really played? They've only done this for this many games. Well, the Bills, did we pay attention last year? Because they hadn't proven anything either. This is the conversation that NFL reporters and people were having about the Chiefs in 2018 and in 2019 going up against the Patriots in the AFC Championship. Well, every time Tom Brady rolls in, they can't figure it out. It only takes once. Now you figured it out.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think it's just that that repetition and getting here. And now that they're here, we really don't have these questions. The questions that we were asking ourselves at 7-5 many weeks ago, we're not asking those now. Those have been now answered because they are where they are. They've answered those questions every game leading up to now. And beating the Packers is not a slight to anybody.
Yeah. Packers are a good team.
Albeit Aaron Rodgers seems to get to the NFC Championship and then just stop. So I don't really know what that is, but
I'll give you this stat, Keaton. Aaron Rodgers is 1-4 in NFC Championship games, and he has as many NFC Championship wins as Rex Grossman.
Oh,
I'll stop right there.
Yeah, that's it. Just leave it there. That's.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's rough. Okay, so looking ahead to the Super Bowl, obviously against the Chiefs, what matchups concern you the most about the Bucs from an offensive perspective? Obviously, everyone can talk about Kelsey, Hill, Clyde, etc. from a defensive perspective. But what do the Bucs possess offensively that you think could exploit the Chiefs?
I think they're more in sync. Antonio Brown was just relatively new to the Bucs when the Chiefs came in late November to Tampa. And although I was in favor of the signing of Antonio Brown, I did not realize how much of a disruption initially he would be to the offense when they tried to fit him into the offense. I mean, you've got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, Cameron Brate, you got Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller. I mean, all those guys are really good receivers. And early in the season, Brady was really developing chemistry with Scotty Miller, as you saw today on that 39-yard touchdown pass to end the first half. Miller has a knack for getting behind the DBs, and he was doing that early in the season. And then Antonio Brown comes in, and they stop throwing the ball to Miller, and they want to use Antonio Brown in that situation. Well, Brady and Brown, everybody thinks that was a great combination. They played one game together in New England. That was it.
Yeah.
One game.
Not a great sample size.
Practice doesn't count. I mean, I could give you the Allen Iverson quote. We're talking about practice, man.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't count. And Brady says, well, I've thrown 500 balls to him. And that doesn't matter. But their timing was really off. And it was really frustrating to see Brady force the ball to Brown on those long balls, and it'd be 3 and out. I mean, they missed. It was very, very frustrating. And then right after the break, things really started to click. They worked on it a lot after the bye week. And Antonio Brown, I think, was one of the missing elements when they played the Chiefs the first time. So they're more in sync offensively. Obviously, Brady has had 7 games to get his timing down better than he did before with his receivers. The running game has really improved. Before today, they were averaging 127 yards a game on the ground in the playoffs, Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. Now, Jones, he wasn't very good today. I think he had 16 yards on 10 carries, something like that. Fournette did a decent job. But they're running the ball very, very, very well right now. The offensive line, which has been good all season, has really played well in the playoffs. They've gone against two of the best defensive lines in the league, in Washington and in New Orleans. Now, Kansas City's defense, I said this before the first matchup. The Chiefs' defense is underrated. Everybody talks about, well, they're not that good. They're pretty good. Okay, they can get it done. You don't go 14-2 and not be able to play defense.
Right.
So the offensive line matchup against the front seven of Kansas City, I think is going to be a bit different. And I think the addition of Antonio Brown, if he's healthy. Now, he missed today's game with a knee injury that he suffered in the New Orleans game. I'm sure that they're probably going to say he'll be ready to go for the Super Bowl. That'll give him 3 weeks off. But I think he just adds a whole different element to that offense into the receiving core.
Absolutely. Well, and I think from that perspective too, as far as the Chiefs defense, I agree with you. They are definitely underrated. They are literally the prototypical bend but do not break defense.
Yeah.
And I think most people are turned off by that because when you look at the stat sheet, they get, the teams can get yards on the Chiefs defense. That's not the problem. You can get yards all day long, but it's the scoring part.
Right.
They have, especially in the playoffs and the postseason, the last couple of seasons have really pulled things together. And as you saw today, they were able to really stifle that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs connection. The only difference and the biggest difference, in my opinion, with the Bucs is that you have, just like the Chiefs, you have options. So you can try to stifle the Mike Evans connection or the Chris Godwin connection or any of those that you want to. But Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes share this level of they don't care who's on the receiving end of the ball that most quarterbacks don't share. Josh Allen looked frantic, especially in the second half of this game, because he couldn't force the ball to Stephon Diggs enough, and in situations that really made sense, and he just couldn't figure it out because he didn't trust any of the other receivers to force the ball too. Tom Brady, for one, doesn't really force the ball, but the other thing is that he doesn't necessarily have to, because if you're taking one guy out like Belichick always does in New England, well, you've got 4 or 5 others. So it's sort of that embarrassment of riches kind of thing. So from as far as an offensive standpoint, as I mentioned, both of the teams are stacked. So do you think this is one of those Super Bowls kind of similar to the Rams and the Patriots Super Bowl a few years ago, where both teams have some talent offensively, but it really comes down to the defenses and which one bends less? Do you think that that bend but don't break style of defense is really going to play a big enough part in this thing to where that almost might be the true, identifying factor of who wins this?
I think it will. One thing that the Bucs have really worked on is their fast starts. The thing that really hurt them earlier in the mid part of the season was their slow starts. They got down to the Chiefs. I think it was 19-0. I mean, Tyreek Hill had 200 yards in the first quarter of that game, something like that. And offensively, the Bucs have started a lot quicker. You saw today, boom, right down the field, touchdown. They're up 7-0, and they have started pretty quickly against New Orleans. They had a nice start against the Lions and Falcons, the last few games of the season. So I think they're going to start quick. And I also think that these teams are both so loaded offensively. It could come down to whoever has the ball last might have the chance to win it. I mean, I think it's going to be a very close game, and who knows how it's going to end up. But it should be one for the ages. And I think the offenses are a step up above both defenses. So you really have the potential for an offensive shootout and a very, very entertaining game. But at some point, one of the defenses is going to have to stand up make a stop. Somebody's going to have to make a play, and we'll see who that is. But those two key factors there, whoever has the ball last could win it, and which defense is going to make a play first, and which defense is going to make a stop at a critical moment in the game.
Right. Well, and I agree definitely, because you mentioned making a stop, because the reality is that both of these teams, as far as especially their quarterbacks in particular, are not known for giving, freebies to the other team. So the reality is that, what you'll probably see, like you said, is just a situation of, well, can you get stops or not? Or, who's going to drag the ball and drag those drives out long enough to maintain possession in an effort, like you said, to have the ball last.
Right. Another key too will be red zone efficiency. Mm-hmm. Now, coming into the game against Green Bay today, the Bucs were 4 of 11 in red zone efficiency. I'm sorry, not third down, red zone efficiency. They were 4 for 11. Today they were 2 for 2. When you're playing a team like the Chiefs or like the Bucs, when you're in the red zone, you got to get 7. Yep. You can't be settling for getting into the red zone and then getting a field goal 2, 3, 4 times down the field. That will really come back to haunt you. So you're going to have to be efficient in the red zone when you get in there. Make sure you're getting 7 and not 3.
Absolutely. So final question for you. Who wins the Super Bowl?
I'm going to take the Bucs.
Huh?
Here's why.
Are you sure?
I'm positive, and here's why I say that. The Chiefs not embarrassed the Bucs, but they beat them pretty good. 27-24 really wasn't an indicator of that game. If you looked at the score, you'd think, oh, that's a pretty close game. Well, it wasn't really.
Right.
The Chiefs had their way with them in the first half, and I think they took the pedal off the gas in the second half, and the Bucs were able to climb in. Tom Brady has a knack for remembering those kind of things. Case in point, last week against New Orleans, he knew that he'd lost twice to the Saints, and the Saints had thoroughly embarrassed him the last time that they played, 38-3, and he was determined not to let that happen again. He almost has this uncanny knack to will his team to win it at times.
Right.
So I'm going to say that the Bucs are going to win by 3.
Yeah,
because I think that they're playing in their home stadium. It'll be a partisan crowd. It's not going to be, like a Bucs crowd, and they will be the home team. This is the year that the NFC gets to be the home team, so they'll get to use their own locker room and things like that. So it won't be really like it's an away game for them. But I think the Bucs win by 3. And one of the keys, I think, while we're talking about keys to the game, is going to be Tyreek Hill. Mm-hmm. He is the wild card. The Bucs defense, and Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator, is going to have to figure out how to limit his big play capability. The last time that Carlton Davis on Hill, and that was no match. Now, Davis has been one of the best DBs for the Bucs this season. He led them with 4 interceptions, but he cannot cover Hill one-on-one. I don't know anybody that can cover Tyreek Hill one-on-one, and they didn't give the man any help. So they're going to have to figure something out to kind of slow Tyreek Hill down. And if I'm not mistaken, Sammy Watkins did not play the last time that the Chiefs and Bucs met. He was injured or out of the game for some reason. So that's another issue and another player that the Bucs are going to have to game plan around. So Bowles has his hands full. He's probably going to be working all night trying to come up with some kind of scheme tonight to get working on, so he can have something to present to the guys on Wednesday when they get together for their first practice. But I'll take the Bucs. Bucs by 3.
All right.
Write it down.
Oh yeah, I've got it. Well, thanks so much, Ken, for joining the show. All right, coming up next, we're actually going to welcome Border Fuels Byron. to talk about the Chiefs' victory over the Bills and Kansas City's outlook heading into the second consecutive Super Bowl. This episode is made possible by BorderFuelSports.com. Borderfuel is a community of sports content creators focusing on freedom of press and speech. Are you interested in telling the sports world all about your opinions? Then join the team today at BorderFuelSports.com/join. That's BorderFuelSports.com/join. Hey Byron, welcome to the show.
Hey, Keaton, what's up? I'm super glad to be on.
Awesome. So, how's it feel for Kansas City to have made it to the final destination on the Run It Back tour?
So in my lifetime, I grew up in a family full of Chiefs fans. So in my lifetime, I heard a bunch of stories about Super Bowl IV and the last time the Chiefs made it to the Super Bowl. And, I never got to see them. I got to see them get close, or, in the 2012 early 2010 seasons, I got to see them get nowhere near it. But in my lifetime, I went from not seeing it at all to seeing the Chiefs last year make it and win it, and then this year make it again. It's a lot of fun. It's a great time to be a Chiefs fan.
Oh, absolutely. So is it just me, or did the defense for the Chiefs really seal the deal in this game? I mean, the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs connection is seemingly it was stifled in this game, which really was a surprise. Was it much of a surprise to you? And do you think they can kind of continue that role defensively into the Super Bowl?
I mean, it has been really surprising. Watching the defense this year, they struggled to cover middle of the field routes, and then today they still technically struggled against the middle of the field. Cole Beasley ate up the linebackers, but in the playoffs last year and then in this year, that secondary has been pretty decent. Frank Clark decides to sit out for 16 games for the most part, and then when it comes to the playoffs, he manages to get around pretty much anyone who gets in his way. Chris Jones bullied the Buffalo offensive line, which is not something we had seen from him all season long. That Chiefs defense, it has the capacity to do really well. Bashaud Breeland, he's a hot commodity. People want to watch him play, but all season long, suddenly he decided to take the year off. Charvarius Ward is one of the top ranked corners season after season. He just doesn't get the interceptions, so he doesn't get as much recognition.
Right,
but when it comes to
one today too,
he dropped one today. When it comes to passer rating allowed, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the league. But it just seemed during the season they weren't interested in playing the regular season this year. But when it's come to the playoffs last week and this week, they've played lights out, taking away the offense's main way of getting things done. I wrote earlier this week in one of my pieces, I'm like, I could tell you the main way to beat the Bills is to shut down Stephon Diggs, but that's not gonna happen. So here's the next best thing to do. But the Chiefs just went out there and shut down Stephon Diggs for 3 quarters. Most of his stats came in fourth quarter garbage time.
Right.
So the Chiefs secondary is good when they want to be. And I think tonight they took out some aggression.
Oh, absolutely. So a lot was made of the Patrick Mahomes turf toe and concussion injuries heading into the game. But in all reality, we didn't see any of that really show up on the field. Do you think more of that was made of the injuries than really existed, or do you think this is more of a reflection of Mahomes' ability to work around some of those small limitations?
It's going to be firstly, the Kansas City trainers and medical staff are fantastic, right? They have done very well. The era of Eric Berry's week to week status is long gone. Okay. The Kansas City medical staff is great. They tend to be on top of things. Before the game, they were talking about what they were doing to accommodate Mahomes' turf toe. He wore a shoe that was like a size larger so he could fit a carbon like plate inside his foot that kept that toe pretty stable. So, a lot of that goes back to the Chiefs medical team. And it is going to come down a lot to, I think a lot more was made out of his concussion than probably should have been. I think people jumped on this was a concussion way too early. From what I understand, this possibly could have been more of he passed out than a concussion. This could have just been one of those type of injuries. Secondly, it was one of two games happening this week, and every storyline of these two games is going to be covered by every outlet. There isn't this story and this story and this story and this story because we have 16 games happening this week. There were two games. So it just got cycled over and over and over again, to the point where I think people worked it up way too much. I won't say that the turf toe didn't affect Mahomes. He did not run. I think he had one, maybe two times that he actually scrambled past the line of scrimmage, but he did move very well behind the line of scrimmage, which makes me think that we probably overplayed it, and Mahomes was probably fine for the most part.
Yeah, he definitely seemed to move around a lot, and honestly, I mean, he really didn't need to do much as far as running. Last week he seemed to be running a whole lot, and a lot of that was some design stuff as well, which I'm sure they avoided that completely this week. But yeah, I mean, he did seem to go. He as far as rollouts and everything, didn't seem to be grimacing or anything on that. So leading up to the week, many reporters as well as a lot of Bills fans subscribed to the idea that Josh Allen had ascended to Patrick Mahomes' level. Did this game debunk any of those suggestions for you?
I mean, you even heard it all day long from even ESPN and stuff like that. The problem is the Bills are good, right? I think they are the best team in the AFC East right now, and they're definitely a team who's going to be in the playoffs for a little while. The problem is the Buffalo Bills are also in the New York media atmosphere. They're going to get all of that attention, right? The Giants and the Jets weren't there, so the New York media just turned upstate real quick and looked at the Bills. So there weren't as many people talking about this as it comes off as. It's just the fact that New York media is just like Los Angeles media. But yeah, you heard a lot of takes that like Josh Allen had ascended Patrick Mahomes, that he was going to show Mahomes that the Bills made the right choice with trading away the 10th overall pick. And the one stat they kept turning to was Josh Allen over the last 6 games has been so impressive. It's like, yes, over that same last 6-game stretch, Patrick Mahomes hasn't played 2.5 games. He didn't play in the wild card game because the Chiefs were the number 1 seed and didn't have to. He didn't play week 17 because, again, the Chiefs didn't have to. And he didn't play half of Cleveland because he was hurt. Like, I don't know how you can look at that and even think about comparing those two. It should probably be a problem that Patrick Mahomes in 3.5 games has comparable stats to Josh Allen. And then when it comes to this game, Patrick Mahomes put any doubt that he is the best quarterback probably in the league to rest, right? Green Bay with Patrick Mahomes wins that game. Tampa Bay with Patrick Mahomes doesn't even have a question. Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes put that game away and put it away hard, winning by, was it 16 points?
I believe so, yeah, 16.
Patrick Mahomes, there shouldn't have been a reason to question him in the first place, but after this game and after what I think he's going to do in 2 weeks, I don't think there will be any room for questioning it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I mean, the thing about that is you got to remember back to 2018, Josh Allen wasn't even on that level of Mahomes. The stats that will suggest that Mahomes has regressed in certain areas and whatnot, but what you're not seeing there is the overall understanding of this offense and the overall ability to manage a game. In 2018, Mahomes was just out there slinging it all over because that's just who he was. That's what he did in college. That's who he was then. And if you watch him now, you're seeing almost a completely different quarterback. The ability is still there, but the understanding and development and just his maturity on the field is completely different than what it was there. Understanding where you are in the game plan and where you are in situational football compared to then, let's just get as many yards right now as we possibly can. And Josh Allen wasn't even on that level. and Mahomes still didn't make it to the Super Bowl in 2018. So this isn't a slight on Josh Allen. This is just an understanding of how hard it is to actually be Patrick Mahomes. It's the same conversation we were having back in 2018, where a lot of people were saying then that Mahomes was reaching that Rodgers level. And even, us as Chiefs fans would like to have believed that that was factual, but you have to take the full scope of everything and understand over, 10 some seasons what Rodgers has been able to do on a year to year to year to year basis. Now, there again, I think now we're having these if you're going to have these conversations about Mahomes' comparison to Rodgers or some of those quarterbacks that have won one Super Bowl and haven't gotten back there since then, you can start having those conversations because even before this game against Buffalo, Mahomes had made it to a Super Bowl and had won it in his first 2 seasons of starting. And now he's going back to a second one, which is something that Breeze didn't do and Rodgers didn't do. Roethlisberger, good Lord, man, just walk away because that's not happening. This is just, these are conversations. Now you can start having these comparisons, not overall career stats, but you can look at accomplishments because this guy is continuing to prove that as much as you want to believe that somebody can ascend, we were talking about Lamar Jackson last year leading up to this season, and where is he at now? When you start doing this, no one should come into the league saying that this guy's the next Tom Brady. Everyone thought Andrew Luck was the next hot stuff, and he skill-wise was, but nobody is the perfect player, and it's really hard to do what Tom Brady's done for the longevity of his career, or to do what Mahomes has done now 3 years in a row at the just crazy levels that he has, and he's continuing to build on records that, good luck catching up to that by the end of his career, So I think you're right. The whole thing with Josh Allen was completely I think it's just, we always want somebody to talk about that could be better. We want to talk about LeBron and Michael Jordan in the NBA. We just want to have those conversations, even though there's really no way to officially say, yeah, this guy was better, or he had more achievements, or this guy, because nothing's the same. The years aren't the same. The eras aren't the same. So, the only thing really I think you figured out by these games on this weekend is that Tom Brady is still the highest achievement that you could possibly be as a quarterback. I don't think anybody can really debate that anymore. We used, a couple years ago, we would have talked about him in Montana, but I don't think we can really do that anymore. I think he's, whether you love or hate Tom Brady, he has surpassed that by this point. But no, I think you're right. I think it's just, it's the market he's in. It's just something to talk about, really, is what it is.
And for me, when Tom Brady goes to his 10th Super Bowl and it's not even with the team, he went for the first 9 with. He went to a different team and he's going back to the Super Bowl, something Montana never did. Right. He went to the Kansas City Chiefs and they went as far as the AFC Championship game, yet somehow Joe Montana and Derek Thomas on the other side couldn't close the deal against the Bills, actually.
Right.
So, for me, looking at what Tom Brady did today against a team that he was a heavy underdog against pretty much cements him as achievement-wise the greatest of all time, although with Patrick Mahomes being the youngest player ever to go to back-to-back Super Bowls, making it this year, it feels like Tom Brady might be padding out his stats because there's a young guy coming for those records.
Oh, absolutely. So Kansas City is returning to the Super Bowl February 7th. What are the biggest differences to you in this year's team versus last year's?
Oh, man. This year's defense doesn't, I know I went on earlier talking about how great this defense can be, but it doesn't feel like it's as cohesive as last year's defense was. At this point, last year's defense was being talked about as this swarming, potentially dangerous game changer against San Francisco. This defense is not that, right? But this defense is smart, and they're going to try and to get into Tom Brady's head, right? They're gonna swarm around him. They're gonna give him a whole bunch of different looks. And on the offensive side, the offensive line is going to be weaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been weaker all season. A bunch of injuries. Starts with the opt out by Duvernay Tardif, but then from there, just injury after injury after injury, and then even today, Eric Fisher goes down with an Achilles injury, which 100% tells me he's not playing on the 7th. But from there, the positives are Travis Kelce is on something this season, right? He is having a season that no one else ever has, right? He broke every tight end record this season. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce's connection is unreal, right? I had Travis Kelce on my FanDuel fantasy team today. Highest scoring player all day, right? No one else had more yards, more touchdowns, more achievements than Travis Kelce did. And that's been what he's been doing all season long. On top of that, Patrick Mahomes, he feels like he is 100%. He feels like he is near perfect right now. Right, during the season, there were questions, but I feel like those questions came because the Chiefs were phoning it in. Today, Mahomes went 29-38 for 305 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, in an AFC championship game,
Right.
it feels like Mahomes is better. It feels like Kelce is on something else. And I don't know a team that can stop that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it almost feels like, the Bucks and the Chiefs obviously have a enormous, just stack of weapons. And really, you can start to see some of the similarities in Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes as far as they don't turn the ball over much. They're very precise with how they're doing things. Again, that's a testament to the development that Patrick has had since 2018 to now. And both defenses are kind of that bend but don't break philosophy, and it really kind of comes down to, honestly, I feel like the Super Bowl is going to come down to whoever has the ball last and whoever can control it the longest. I mean, it could honestly, last year's Super Bowl was the Damian Williams Bowl, and I don't think anybody thought that was going to happen. Everybody, I'm sure, going in was like, okay, well, we got Tyreek, we got Travis Kelce, we got Sammy Watkins. Well, any of those guys can ball out any day of the week. But they forgot the guy in the back, So,
and I mean,
yeah.
Watching what the Green Bay Packers did to the Bucks today, you do have to think like this probably isn't going to be the Darrell Williams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire show,
Right?
On the 7th, but they allowed Lazard and Marquise Valdez-Scantling to put up some yards on him. Yeah, they kept Devontae Adams pretty quiet for most of the game. I want to say the fourth quarter is when he really balled out, but they let the number 2 and number 3 receiver run all over them. And the thing with the Chiefs is, if you're going to do that, the 1 and 2 receivers switch all the time. It's either Tyreek Hill or it's Travis Kelce. Who are you going to stop? Who are you going to let loose? Because if you let Travis Kelce loose, he's going to make the first one miss, and he's going to start taking 20 at a time. If you let Tyreek Hill loose, okay, he's over the top, and that's how you lost in the first quarter of your first meetup with the Chiefs, right? That's how you let 218 yards in the first quarter to Tyreek Hill in your first meeting.
Right. And I mean, I think the Chiefs proved against the Bills as well that they can scheme anybody. They can scheme anybody open, any situation. I mean, even the Bucks, you saw Scotty Miller doing work over there, and everybody thought when they signed Antonio Brown that was the end all be all, But like you said, even Green Bay, I think when you look at all these teams, of the 4 teams that played this weekend, the Bills were the only one that struggles when they have to go to secondary options, and you saw that because when Stephon Diggs wasn't there, or Josh was running, or he was backpedaling, couldn't get it, he couldn't squeeze and force it enough to Diggs, to make a big enough difference in this thing. and you saw the effects of that. You saw what that made him do. So the thing about that that's different now is that Tom Brady doesn't really have that problem, but it goes the same way for Patrick. Patrick doesn't really have that problem. You saw Nicole Hardman after he fumbled that ball, and they said, you know what, we don't care. We're going to give it to you right now, and you're going to do something with it. And he did. He did it 3 or 4 times in this game where they got him in space, and he made something happen. So it doesn't have to be, especially, I mean, if they can find a way to get Sammy back, I think that, more depth the better. But because we're due for a Sammy Watkins game in the playoffs.
Oh,
So I mean,
that's why he was inactive. They're just saving it.
You're right. They just got to hold off. We really need that one to be the last one. So yeah, no, I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, if you you can't take Kelsey and Hill away all the time. You're going to have to sacrifice one or the other. And either way, it's like, do you want to die slowly or do you want to die really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to go ahead and let that over the top stuff fly again against Carlton Davis, okay, we'll be up by 30 at halftime and we'll just phone it in from there because that's where we'll be if you do that. If you give it to Kelsey, you might have a little bit more of a chance because the over the middle stuff will be there. But no, I completely agree with you there. So, is it safe to say that you're fairly confident as the team goes to this Super Bowl? It's the second one in 2 years.
Oh man, I would love to tell you that I'm like 100% zoned in on the Chiefs, but I am so worried about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being the home team. Right? We've seen the COVID schedule come out for what the next couple of weeks look like for the Super Bowl teams. And if we're talking about Green Bay versus Kansas City, both teams have to apply by the same schedule. It's a strenuous travel and media schedule because of like on top of the normal Super Bowl media press, you also have COVID guidelines and all sorts of testing of this kind and that kind, this kind of, pressure and schedule and that type of timing and this. And like, that's going to really affect the teams in the game, except for the team that lives less than a block away from the facility, like,
and gets to use their home locker room.
Like the Chiefs are traveling from Kansas City to Tampa Bay. I want to say on Thursday is the day that they start traveling this week. And then they get to start putting up with all the media stuff and they get to start doing all the testing. Tampa can start that anytime this week. Right. And they can spread it out however they want. They can keep their guys at home as much as they need to so that they can rest and be ready. And that's an advantage that I don't think people understand how massive an advantage that's going to be. Like, sure, it's Andy Reid after a bye week. Sure, it's 2 weeks of rest to the best team in the league, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question for you. Who or what not named Mahomes is the biggest X factor for the Chiefs in beating the Bucs?
And beating the Bucs, it's going to be Tyrann Mathieu. And it has been Tyrann Mathieu the last 2 weeks. Against the Browns, he had that interception and he leads the defense. And whatever he's doing, whatever he's feeling, the defense is doing and the defense is feeling. Right? You saw him rushing Josh Allen every other play. And that kept the defensive energy up and it kept them moving fast and blitzing. And Tyrann Mathieu is going to have to set the same energy and the same precedent against Tom Brady, right? Like, I would love to tell you it's Chris Jones because the Chris Jones-Tom Brady rivalry is amazing, and I can't wait for them to do it one more time. But if Tyrann Mathieu can get on the defensive side of the ball, if he can do something to Tom Brady, whether it be sack him, pick him off, knock a ball to the ground, and start getting that honey badger energy flowing, that defense will start swarming around and they're going to be able to just maul Tom Brady.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. I think he's been incredibly big for them, and especially when you're going up against the Bucs, even if it's Thornhill, obviously balled out as well. If you can get both of those guys in their A games against the Bucs, I think you're ability to close down a lot of that middle stuff and a lot of that, especially safety net Gronk and things like that going on. If you can shut that stuff down, I think after you saw the corners go up against the Bills and what we were able to do against Diggs, I think you can do that well enough to limit the big stuff, right? And if you can do that, then you can allow the Honey Badger and you can allow Thornhill and Sorensen to do work in the lower and shallow and mid-level stuff to make a big difference. And you, like you mentioned, I mean, that turns into exotic blitzes, that turns into a lot of strategic stuff that Spags obviously likes to utilize a lot. So I actually lied. I do have one final question. Who wins the Super Bowl?
The Chiefs are winning the Super Bowl, right? I don't know how you can watch how the Chiefs ended this game, besides all the fighting crap that happened, but how the Chiefs ended today's game. That's the type of energy they're taking to the Super Bowl, right? Tampa Bay is not taking that energy into the Super Bowl. Like, yeah, they seemed excited, and I'm sure the city of Tampa is popping off that they are going back to the Super Bowl. But if you looked at the Chiefs at the end of that game, Patrick Mahomes was fired up. That defense wasn't going to let anything else happen, right? They were swarming, like there were backups swarming Josh Allen, right? The Chiefs, Darrell Williams is having a great playoffs, and even he popped off for a great 11-yard run there at the end. That's the type of momentum that you take into the Super Bowl and you finish the season with.
Yeah.
Right. The Chiefs took that same energy, took that same momentum into the Super Bowl last year. And that's the energy that they fed off in Jet Chip Wasp and their comeback. Right. That's that place that you dig down deep in and you find when you're in those crunch moments. And I think Kansas City is going to be able to do that if they end up in a crunch moment. But otherwise, I don't know if Tampa Bay is going to stop them. They've beat them once. They went down there. They beat them once. I think they can. They didn't just beat them once. They went down there and beat them once after Tampa Bay had a bye. They beat Tampa at home off of a bye. So I think Kansas City goes in there and I think they do the same exact thing. Sure, I don't think Tyreek Hill is having 218 yards in the first quarter this time, but I think they pop off and they remind people that they are the best team in the league for a reason.
Right. Yeah, I think. I mean, you hit on it. This week in particular, they proved that it's no longer the get the lead and then let it simmer. They weren't afraid to come out and get down 9-0 and then take it from there and just blast off and not look back. I mean, Mahomes had no interest in sitting there in the fourth quarter and running the ball. He said, "No, thank you. I'll go ahead and score a couple more times and we'll just cap it off that way." So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that ideally, I think, especially in the playoffs, it seems like that whole strategic of game management and just getting close enough that you can win it fairly isn't going to be there anymore. The only thing that kind of scares me a little bit is I know that Tom Brady is fairly vengeful. I don't know if anyone's noticed that, but he. You take it from the Saints game, he did not like getting smacked by the Saints to end the season. And he came out last week and said, "Not again." So, but I think from that perspective, both quarterbacks share that gene of, laying themselves out on the line, to do everything possible to win a game. In Patrick's case, it almost was a problem, but then it wasn't. So,
For this game, of course, it's Mahomes Brady 5. The series is tied up 2-2. A lot is going to be said about that these next 2 weeks, and a lot is going to be said about Tom Brady lost the game earlier this season, and Tom Brady lost the game in New England last season, and he's going to be vengeful to finally, come back after losing 2 in a row. But if you can look at the way Patrick Mahomes has played over the last 2 seasons and tell me that he will ever forget what Tom Brady did to him in the 2018 AFC Championship game, like I posted that picture earlier on Twitter of the shot of Patrick Mahomes just staring at the ground as Tom Brady drove the field, never gave him the ball in overtime, and scored it on him. I can tell you Patrick Mahomes remembers that every time he plays. And I can tell you every time he's played a playoff game, he remembers it. That's why he's undefeated since that moment.
Right.
That's why no team has even gotten close to beating Patrick Mahomes since that moment.
Right.
Right. You can go up 24-0. You were never even close to beating Patrick Mahomes. You can go up 10-0, 9-0, 10-0. Doesn't matter. Patrick Mahomes is going to beat you because he remembers what that felt like. And I don't think he lets Tom Brady do that ever again. He is too competitive. Like yes, Tom Brady's vengeful, but I think Patrick Mahomes is just as vengeful. And I think he's been doing what he's been doing for this moment. He wanted this.
Right. Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I certainly hope that continues. But hey, man, thank you for joining the show.
Hey, no problem. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So thanks so much to our listeners and supporters for tuning in to the second episode of the Go Run a Route podcast. We'll be back next Monday to talk more about the upcoming Super Bowl matchup and the offseason that lies ahead for the NFL and its teams. You can follow along throughout the week on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram by using the username @GoRunARoute. Thanks again, and we'll catch you all next time.